I found the passport on a Wednesday afternoon inside a hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre that had been sitting on our shared bookshelf for 2 years. Brand new. Issued 4 months earlier, while she was supposedly too ill to stand without assistance. While I was calling vendors and returning deposits and telling everyone who asked that the wedding was cancelled because the woman I loved needed me more than I needed a ceremony. The passport had 11 stamps in it. 11 countries. In 4 months. While she was in recovery. There was also a boarding pass tucked inside the back cover. Printed 3 days earlier. A one-way ticket to a country I had never heard her mention once in 4 years of knowing her. Departing in 72 hours. I sat on the bedroom floor with the hollowed-out book in my lap, and I looked at the evidence of a performance so sustained and so precise and so completely believed by everyone around her, including me, that I still could not fully locate the version of the situation that was not what it appeared to be. There was not one. My name is Fallon. And this is the story of the woman I loved who faked a complete psychological breakdown to steal $43,000 of my money and disappear into a life she had been building while I was busy saving her. Some wounds change you. Some betrayals break you. And some people quietly, deliberately rise. This is a quiet storm story. Her name was Diane, and I want to tell you who she was before I tell you who she turned out to be, because the before matters. The before is how it worked. We met at a conference 4 years ago. She was presenting on crisis communication strategy. Precise. Articulate. The specific quality of someone who understands exactly how language shapes perception and deploys that understanding with the ease of a person who has been doing it so long it no longer requires effort. I was in the audience taking notes on a presentation I had come specifically to hear. Afterward, at the networking reception, she found me near the door and said your questions were the best in the room. I was not aware I had asked any questions. She smiled. You asked them with your face. That should have told me everything. We dated for 18 months before she moved in. Another 14 before I proposed. The engagement period was 14 months. We had been together 4 years total when the first tremor happened. A Thursday evening. Dinner at home. Her hand shaking badly enough that the fork fell from her fingers and made a sound on the tile that neither of us had been expecting. She looked at her hand with the expression of someone confronting something she had been trying to ignore for a long time. It had happened before. She said it quietly. Just once. A few weeks ago. I did not want to worry you. The doctor's appointment was the following Monday. The diagnosis that came back 2 weeks later was described by the specialist as a complex neurological presentation requiring immediate and sustained intervention. Private treatment. Intensive monitoring. Rest. No stress. No wedding. The wedding was 11 weeks away. I canceled it the same week. I want to tell you what canceling the wedding actually cost, because the numbers matter. The venue deposit, non-refundable. $14,000. The catering deposit, partially refundable. We recovered 40%. The photographer, non-refundable. $3,200. The florist. The dress alterations. The accommodation block booked for out-of-town guests. The honeymoon, a 2-week trip that had been planned and paid for in full 18 months earlier because the destination required advance booking. Total unrecoverable loss. $22,000. I did not hesitate. Not because I am exceptional. Because I loved her, and because when someone you love is sick, the calculation is not complicated. You do what the situation requires, and you do not perform the sacrifice for an audience, and you do not expect acknowledgement, and you do not keep a ledger. I did not keep a ledger. That was the mistake. Not the generosity. The generosity was real and was not wrong. The mistake was that I also trusted her completely with the additional funds required for the private treatment program she had been recommended. A specialist facility. 3 months minimum. Significant cost. The total she presented to me across 3 separate conversations over 6 weeks, each one accompanied by documentation that looked official and felt credible and that I did not independently verify, was $21,000. I transferred it across in 3 installments. She managed the payments directly because she said the facility required direct patient billing, and she found it easier to handle the administrative side herself given that it was her treatment and her records. I accepted this because it was reasonable and because I trusted her and because I was managing the collapsed wedding logistics and my own grief and the adjustment to a life that had changed shape faster than I had been prepared for. $43,000. That was the total. 22 in unrecoverable deposits. 21 in treatment funding. Transferred across a period of 6 weeks to a woman who was at that moment booking international flights. I want to tell you about the tremors because they were extraordinary. Not in their frequency, in their specificity. They occurred at the precise moments when doubt would have been most natural and most damaging to the performance. When I asked questions. When the bills arrived. When I mentioned to a friend that something felt slightly off and then mentioned the conversation to Diane. The tremors arrived. Not dramatically. Not in a way that felt performed. In the specific exhausted involuntary way of someone whose body is expressing what their mind is trying to suppress. Her left hand primarily. Sometimes her right. Once a full body tremor that lasted 40 seconds and left her pale and genuinely frightening to watch. I held her through that one. Sitting on the bathroom floor at 11 at night with her head against my shoulder and her breathing unsteady, and the specific helplessness of someone watching a person they love experience something they cannot fix. She whispered, "I am so sorry you have to see this." I said, "Stop apologizing." She said, "I do not know what I would do without you." I know now that she was telling the truth in the way that a person tells the truth about something they are in the process of dismantling. She genuinely did not know. She had done the calculation and had concluded that my resources and my care and my complete willingness to believe her were the most efficient means of funding the exit she had been planning. Without me, she would have needed a different strategy. I was the strategy. She did not feel nothing. I want to be careful about that because it would be easier to believe she felt nothing, and the evidence suggests it was more complicated. What she felt was subordinate to what she needed. And what she needed was the $43,000 and the cover story and the 2 months of time. I gave her all three. If this story is hitting something real for you right now, hit subscribe. I post every day, and I do not want you to miss what comes next. She left for the facility on a Monday morning. Not with luggage that looked excessive. With exactly what someone going to a residential treatment program would bring. Practical. Thoughtful. A bag I had helped her pack the previous evening while she sat on the bed with the specific fragility of someone conserving energy. She kissed me at the door. She said, "I will be back different. Better. I promise." I believed her. The house was very quiet after she left. The specific quiet of a shared space suddenly occupied by one person. I worked from home that week. Kept the same routines. Called her on the number she had given me for the facility's approved contact line, which she said they monitored and routed to patients during designated call times. She answered every call. Her voice had the texture of someone making genuine effort. Present but slightly distant. The quality I associated with medication adjustment, which the specialist had mentioned would be part of the early treatment phase. On the Wednesday afternoon of the second week, I was looking for a book. Not Jane Eyre specifically. Something to read. I scanned the shared shelf in the bedroom. The shelf we had built together, the shelf whose contents I knew the way you know the contents of a shared space without ever deliberately cataloging them, and my hand stopped on Jane Eyre because the spine looked slightly wrong. Not damaged. Wrong. The specific wrongness of an object that has been handled more than its usual handling pattern would suggest. I pulled it from the shelf. The pages had been hollowed out from approximately chapter 4 to chapter 22. A clean rectangular cavity, lined with a piece of black felt that had been cut and fitted with the precision of someone who had done this deliberately and had taken time over it. Inside the cavity, the passport, the boarding pass, and something else I have not mentioned yet. A folded piece of paper. My name on the outside. In her handwriting. I did not open it immediately. I sat on the bedroom floor with the hollowed-out book in my lap and the folded piece of paper in my hand, and I stayed there for a long time because I understood that opening it would complete a transition I could not reverse. Before I opened it, I still had the version of the situation where there was an explanation, where the passport was from a previous relationship, where the boarding pass was a mistake, where the letter said something that made the cavity in the book and the stamps in the passport and the one-way ticket resolve into something other than what they appeared to be. After I opened it, that version would no longer be available. I opened it. She had written it in the careful, deliberate style she brought to all written communication. Organized. Clear. The crisis communications professional even in this. She had written that she was sorry. Not for what she had done, but for the fact that I had to find out this way. She had written that the relationship had been real in its early stages, and that what had developed into a plan had not begun as one. She had written that the situation she was leaving was one she could not name in the letter, but that I would eventually understand required the measures she had taken. She had not written what the situation was. She had written that the money was not something she intended to repay, but that she hoped I would come to understand it as the cost of her survival. Her survival. From what she did not say, she had written one more thing at the bottom of the page. A single line separated from the rest by a space. You are the best person in this story. That is not nothing. I folded the letter, put it back in the cavity, put the boarding pass in my pocket, and I called my friend Nadia. Nadia had disliked Diane from the beginning. Not dramatically. Not with accusations or visible hostility. With the specific quiet reserve of someone who has assessed a person and found something they cannot name but will not ignore. She had been present at the engagement dinner and had hugged me warmly and had said Diane's name once and moved the conversation to something else. I had noticed and had chosen not to interrogate it because Nadia was protective of me in ways that sometimes produced caution where celebration was warranted, and I had wanted the evening to be uncomplicated. When I called her on the Wednesday afternoon, she answered before the second ring. I need you to help me understand something. Tell me. I told her everything. The book. The passport. The stamps. The boarding pass. The letter. She was quiet throughout. Not the silence of someone shocked. The silence of someone who has been waiting for a specific phone call for a long time and is now receiving it and is managing the specific feeling of being right about something they wished they had been wrong about. When I finished, she asked 3 questions in sequence. Do you have the boarding pass? Yes. Do you know anyone who can trace where the treatment payments actually went? My brother works in financial compliance. How long until the flight? 72 hours. A pause. Then, your brother first. Tonight. And Fallon, do not call the facility contact number again. Why? Because I do not think there is a facility. My brother Eli worked in financial compliance for a regional bank and had the specific combination of technical knowledge and personal loyalty that made him the right person to call at 9 in the evening with a request that existed in a gray area between favor and investigation. He called me back at 6 the following morning. His voice had the careful quality of someone delivering information they wish they did not have. The first transfer, $7,000, went to a legitimate private medical billing company. Real company. Real services. They have no record of a patient by that name or that case reference number. The billing code used matches their system, but the patient file does not exist in their database. She used a real billing code from a real company to generate a fraudulent invoice. The second transfer, $8,000, went to a financial services company registered 18 months ago in a jurisdiction known for minimal disclosure requirements. No physical address that traces to anything real. The account it landed in has been dormant since the transfer arrived. The third transfer, $6,000, went to a personal account in a name I did not recognize. Eli paused. That name appears on an international property listing I found in about 4 minutes of searching. A rental agreement for an apartment in the destination city on the boarding pass. Signed 14 months ago. Monthly payments. From an account I cannot fully trace, but that appears to have been funded from multiple small transfers over the past 18 months. She had been building the exit for 18 months. The tremors had started 7 months ago. The engagement had been 2 years ago. She had accepted my proposal, and then 11 months later had begun constructing the departure. I sat with that timeline for a long time. Eli said, "Do you want to know anything else?" I said, "Not tonight." He said, "Fallon, what she did is fraud. You can report this." I know. What do you want to do? I want to go to the airport. Nadia drove me. Not because I asked her to. Because she arrived at my door at 5 in the morning on the departure day with coffee and the specific quality of someone who has already decided they are coming and is not presenting it as a choice. We did not speak much in the car. The airport was ordinary in the way airports are ordinary at 6 in the morning. The specific purposeful movement of people going somewhere. The particular light of a space designed to process rather than to feel. I had the boarding pass. Eli had given me the flight details. Terminal 3. Departure at 9:40. The gate area would be open from 7:30. We found the gate at 7:52. She was already there. Sitting in the gate seating area in the specific posture of someone who has been traveling for a long time and has developed the ability to make a plastic airport chair feel like a place of rest. A small carry-on beside her. A coffee she was not drinking. Her phone in her hand. She did not see me immediately. I had 4 seconds to observe her before she did. No tremors. Her hand holding the coffee cup was completely steady. Her posture was relaxed. Her face had the specific quality of someone who is not sick and has not been sick and whose body carries none of the held tension of someone managing a physical condition. For seconds. Then she looked up. The sequence of expressions that crossed her face in the following 3 seconds was the most honest thing I had ever seen her produce. Shock first. Then calculation. Then the beginning of the fragile patient expression, the slight softening, the careful repositioning. I put the hollowed-out book on the seat beside her. The expression stopped assembling itself. She looked at the book. Then at me. Then at Nadia standing slightly behind me. The tremors did not arrive. I sat down. Not across from her. Beside her. Because what I needed was not a confrontation across a distance. It was a conversation at close range where she could not manage the space between us. Nadia stood at the perimeter. Present. Not intervening. I looked at the boarding pass in my hand. Then at her. 18 months. She did not pretend not to understand. Her voice when it came was different from the voice I had known for 4 years. Not harder. Cleaner. The specific quality of someone who has stopped performing and is now simply speaking. I needed to leave. From what? A long pause. Something I cannot explain here. You explained it in the letter as your survival. I would like to understand what that means. She looked at the gate. The departure board. The ordinary movement of the airport around us. There are people who would follow me if they knew where I was going. Her voice was level. People who would not stop following. What I built here was the only way to disappear completely enough that they could not find me. I needed resources. I needed a destination they could not trace. I needed a cover story long enough to give me the head start. I looked at her. I needed you to not look for me until I was already gone. So you gave me a reason to let you go willingly. Yes. The wedding. The deposits. The treatment funds. Yes. I processed that for a moment. Are you actually in danger? She met my eyes for the first time since I had sat down. Yes. I sat with that for a long time. Then I said, that does not make it right. No. Her voice did not waver. It does not. You could have told me. She shook her head. If you had known, you would have tried to help. And your trying to help would have made it worse. The only version where I survive this is the one where nobody who knows me knows where I am. Including me. Especially you. Because you would not have been able to pretend you did not know. I looked at the gate. The boarding announcement came over the speakers. I have reported the financial transfers. My brother has the documentation. She nodded. She had expected this. That is your right. I know. A pause. I am sorry. Her voice had the quality of something said without strategy for the first time. For what it cost you. I knew what it would cost, and I chose it anyway. That is something I will carry. I stood up. Nadia appeared beside me. I looked at Diane for the last time. She looked back with the specific expression of a woman who has made a choice she cannot undo and has accepted that fully and is asking for nothing. I picked up the hollowed-out book. I left the boarding pass on the seat beside her. Then Nadia and I walked away from the gate. The legal process was straightforward in its structure and slow in its execution in the way that financial fraud cases always are when the perpetrator is no longer in the jurisdiction. Eyre had documented everything. The fraudulent billing code, the dormant account, the property rental, the 18 months of small transfers that had built the fund before she had needed me to complete it. The case was filed. The international dimensions made recovery uncertain. Josephine, the same attorney Nadia had used years before for a completely different matter, and whose number Nadia had kept for reasons she could not articulate, told me honestly that the money was probably gone and that the process was worth pursuing for the record rather than the recovery. I pursued it for the record. Not from bitterness. From the specific understanding that documentation matters. That the record of what happened is the only thing that makes something real in a legal context. That the record was mine to make and mine to hold regardless of what it produced. The wedding deposits were gone. The treatment funds were gone. The honeymoon that had been non-refundable was taken by Eli and his wife, who had been disappointed for us when we canceled and who deserved something good to come from the wreckage. I moved into a smaller apartment. Not dramatically. Simply. With the understanding that my financial life needed to be rebuilt on a foundation that belonged entirely to me, and that rebuilding requires starting from the actual current position rather than the position you believed you were in. Nadia helped me move. She did not say, "I told you so." That was one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. For a long time, the question I could not stop asking was whether the danger she described was real. Not because it would change what she had done. It would not. The fraud was the fraud regardless of the reason. The performance was the performance regardless of the motivation. The $43,000 was gone regardless of what it had been used for. But the question mattered to me because I needed to understand who I had actually loved. Not the performance. The person underneath it. Eli found something 3 months after the airport. Not through any official channel. Through the specific determined research of a brother who had watched his sister lose $43,000 and had not been able to stop thinking about the woman who had said she was in danger. A news report. A small item from a regional publication in another country. About a woman matching Diane's general description who had testified in a closed hearing related to an organized financial crime network. The names were redacted. The details were minimal. But the timeline matched. And the country matched. Eli sent it to me without comment. I read it twice. I did not know what to do with it. I still do not know exactly what to do with it. The fraud was real. The danger appears to have been real. Both things exist simultaneously, and neither cancels the other. What I know is this. She made a choice to survive using the resources of someone who loved her without telling that person the truth that might have produced a different and possibly better outcome. That choice was wrong. It was also human in the specific desperate way that survival decisions are human when someone believes they have no other option. I do not forgive it. I also do not reduce her entirely to it. Those two things can exist together. I have learned to let them. There are things this experience clarified that I want to say directly because I think they are useful beyond my specific situation. The first thing is about empathy as a vulnerability. Empathy is not a weakness. It is one of the most important qualities a person can have. But empathy without structure can be exploited by people who understand how it works. The person who staged the tremors understood that my empathy would override my skepticism in a moment of apparent crisis. She had watched me long enough to know that. She had built the performance specifically around the quality she knew would make me stop asking questions. That is not a reason to become less empathetic. It is a reason to understand that empathy and verification are not mutually exclusive. You can care deeply about someone and still confirm the facts. You can love someone and still independently verify the invoices. Compassion does not require you to stop thinking. The second thing is about independent financial access. I had transferred $43,000 across 6 weeks without once asking for a direct contact at the facility. Without once asking for a printed receipt from a source other than her. Without once speaking to a medical professional independently. Not because I was naive. Because I was grieving a canceled wedding and managing real logistical chaos, and because the person I trusted most was handling the medical side, and I did not want to add to her stress by appearing to doubt her. In a genuine medical emergency, that approach is fine. In a manufactured one, it is the exact passivity the performance requires. For every significant financial transfer, verify the destination independently. Not as an accusation. As a standard practice that applies to every significant transaction, regardless of who is asking and regardless of how much you trust them. Make it a rule that exists before you need it. The third thing is about the hollowed-out book. It was there for 2 years. On the shelf, I looked at every day. The spine looked slightly wrong, and I had registered that wrongness peripherally without following it, because there was no reason at that point to follow it. Follow the small things. Not obsessively. Not from a place of suspicion. But when something catches your attention in a way you cannot immediately explain, give it at least one more second of consideration before you move on. The hollowed-out book gave me 72 hours. 72 hours was enough. The fourth thing is about the letter. She had written, "You were the best person in this story." That is not nothing. I have thought about that sentence many times. Not because it consoled me. Because it told me something true about what I had been in the situation and what I needed to continue being in the ones that followed. Being the best person in a story where someone deceives you is not the same as being foolish. It is not the same as being weak. It is not the same as failing to protect yourself. It means you showed up with your whole heart in a situation that did not deserve it. And when you find yourself on the other side of that, you do not become the person who stops showing up with their whole heart. You become the person who understands that showing up fully is only possible when the foundation is real. Build the foundation first. Verify the invoices. Follow the small things. And when someone you love is in crisis, extend yourself fully and completely. But keep the receipts. That is what quiet storm is. Not revenge. Not noise. Just a woman who understood, quietly and deliberately, what it truly costs to rise. Subscribe. Because there is another storm coming tomorrow.